folks, welcome back to Doing Brew. On today's video, I'm going to show you how to install a large sandstone stone to make a real nice fireplace hearth. Now, I installed this stone around a three-sided peninsula fireplace, but you could install it around any fireplace. And in fact, if you just have a standard in-wall fireplace, then your job is going to be a whole lot easier. But I tell you, this is the first time I've ever worked with this type of stone before, and this size of stone. And to be quite honest, I was a little intimidated at the beginning of the project, or even the thought of tackling this project. But like most home improvement things, when you look at the project in its parts, it's not that difficult to do. And I was surprised at really how easy it was to install this stone around this three-sided peninsula fireplace. And I really think it turned out pretty nice. My grout lines are pretty even. The 45-degree angle cuts for the corners weren't that difficult to do. Yes, I needed a helper to hold the stones because they are pretty heavy. But overall, it was an easy project to complete. So let's go ahead and start our build of this hearthstone around the fireplace. So the first thing I need to do is build a base to support my hearthstone. I'm going to build mine out of 2x6 stud lumber, and I'm going to cut that down to 5 inches in width. Now that 5-inch tall base will be perfect for the stone I chose because it'll set it about 1/8 of an inch below the bottom level of the fireplace. And as you can see, I cut quite a bit of 2x6 material down to that 5-inch height. Now I've got a pile of it, and now I need to cut that to length to accommodate the perimeter of my fireplace. So I'm going to take a number of measurements here and head out to the chop saw and just make what amounts to a whole lot of straight cuts. And no fancy joinery here, just nice, easy 90-degree straight cuts. And I'll screw those ends together during the final assembly. Now, just what I'm testing out here is stacking up 3 2x6s, cut down to 5 inches. And that's going to be about the perfect width for the stone I chose, which is 6 inches wide. So I'm going to stack 3 deep for an overall depth of 4.5 inches. Now, after I build out the 4.5 inch deep wooden base, apply the Durock, then my stone facing to match my fireplace, the result will be a nice overhang of the stone. Now, taking a few more measurements for my next cut, I want everything to be about 4.5 inches out from the fireplace all the way around. So this is the final build. These are all dry fit together. Of course, as you can see, I used blocks instead of full pieces in the middle to give me that 4.5 inch depth around the entire perimeter. No sense wasting all that wood. This wooden base that I'm building up will be plenty strong to support that stone. Now I'm going to disassemble my base, which was dry fit together, and I'm going to permanently install it using some liquid nails and some exterior grade decking screws, which is going to hold this thing together solid as a rock. Just a day glad Okay, our base construction is nearly complete. This really went together nicely, and it's solid as a rock. Only took me about 30 minutes to put together. Now it's time to start thinking about wrapping the wooden base in a cement board. Okay, and to cut that cement board, I'm going to use this special carbide tip knife, which does a pretty nice job of making a straight cut through the cement board. I'm going to use my T-square here and set it at 5 inches. That'll ensure I get a nice straight cut. And really, I'm more scoring the cement board than I am cutting clean through it. So that carbide tip blade kind of breaks the integrity of those first few layers of cement. Cutting the cement board is very much like cutting drywall. You're going to score one side and then crack it along that score line, and then go back with your utility knife to cut the back edge. But in this case, you're really cutting through a fiberglass mesh that provides the strength to the cement board. Okay, now it's time to check and test for fit. Kona's there overseeing the project, making sure that I cut and install everything to a standard. And this actually looks pretty good. Just slightly below the level at which that stone's going to come out. And that's where I want it to be. I don't want to raise up the front edge of that stone at all and make it unlevel. Now I cut it to fit, and now I'm going to secure it with some specialized screws. These are backer-on screws. You might also have heard of rock-on screws. They're both essentially the same type of screw, intended to tap through the cement board and then secure the cement board to the wood with a nice broad head. Okay, now with our backer board installed, it's time to seal the stone that we're going to use for the hearth. Now I've chosen a gray sandstone. This is 2 1/4 inches thick by 6 inches wide, and they come in 8-foot sections. Now, to be honest, I started sealing this days before, and you'll want to give yourself plenty of time for this step. You want to have at least 3 to 4 coats of sealer on before you start cutting. Okay, now that we've got the sealer on, it's time to start cutting our stone. And the first cut I'm going to make is the 45-degree angle cut for the corner. And I'm going to use my carpenter's square, which ensures that I get a nice 45-degree line. Now you'll notice that I offset that line just a smidge from the corner, and that's because of the split face on the front of the stone. If I went all the way to the edge, I would end up not having a nice even transition around the corner. Next up, I need to get the overall length of the stone. Now, let's head on out to the wet saw. Now, as you can see, this is a long stone and pretty doggone heavy. So I've asked Big Aiden to help support the long end of this stone. That way I can focus on keeping the stone and the saw blade right on that line. Now this is where this rigid saw really comes in handy, because that movable table allows me to move the stone and the table as opposed to sliding it over some other types of wet saws, and this will ensure a nice straight cut. And I tell you what, I'm really happy with how this turned out. This is the first time I've ever cut this type and size of stone before, and for my first cut, I couldn't be any happier. Nice, smooth, straight, true 45-degree line. And now it's time to set up for our straight cut. Aiden's going to hold the tape on one end. I'm going to read off my Palm Pilot there, 54 5/8 inches. Make a mark and make one more cut on this stone. And that cut worked out better than the first. Real happy with that. So I'll bring it into the house, use a Scotch-Brite pad to get any of the Sharpie residue off. We'll put this stone in place for a test fit. Kona's back to QA our work. And that's looking pretty good. Now, cutting the remainder of the stones is exactly the same process. So I'm not going to bore you guys watching me cut every single stone. So as you can see, I have 3 of my 4 stones cut. Now I need to cut out my final stone, which is the short side of the peninsula. So I need to take another measurement. And I'm going to measure along the short leg of my stone, the inside dimension, and I want to have a 1/4 inch grout line on each side. So I'm going to subtract a 1/2 inch from that overall length. Now it's back out to the wet saw. And this one's going to be a little bit trickier in that I have to do 2 45-degree cuts. Okay, done with our cuts, and they went well, but that is not what I'm looking for. I want a cleaner grout line than that. Something that is much more uniform as opposed to an angle that closes on itself. So here's a little trick. This is just a large paint stirring stick from my local hardware store. I'm going to put that on one edge of my stone, and then I'm just going to trace that line. So your guess is as good as mine of what the new angle on that stone I just drew is. But you know what? That's going to give me a nice 1/4 inch grout line, and no one's going to know that the cut on that stone is 42, 43, 43 and 5/8 degrees. It's just not going to make a difference. And that looks pretty sharp. So just use that little trick and no one's going to know the difference, and you're going to have a nice consistent grout line. So of course everything's just dry fit at this point as I prep to glue everything down. Here's a quick look at what the stone's going to look like against the hearthstone. And I'm going to start with the gluing process here on this small stone. Now you can see I've got a couple of shims in there. Another little trick is just to run your level back and forth across your grout line, and if one side's higher or lower, you're going to catch and you'll want to level it out. So again, I'm going to be using the extreme heavy duty liquid nails. I'm going to apply a real generous amount onto our wooden base. And then very simply set that first stone in place. I'm going to wiggle that back and forth just a little bit and then apply quite a bit of pressure down just with my hand leaning full into the stone to distribute that adhesive underneath. And then I'm going to apply my shims as close to exactly the way I had them the first time during the dry fit. And then I'll go back and check it again with the level. Running the level back and forth, see it catches there just a little bit. So I'm going to raise up that stone with the shim, run the level back across, still catching a little bit. Now this certainly isn't difficult work, but it can be a little bit tedious, but you want to take the time to make sure that your stones are completely level or as close to level with one another as possible. Now the back edge of that corner needs to come up a little bit, So I'll adjust the opposite shim, get that nice and level, and check to make sure that it didn't throw the other side off. So that corner is looking good. Now it's time to adhere the largest stone. A little bit difficult as a one-man job just due to the weight of the stone. Again, applying a liberal amount of adhesive, and then I'll follow the exact same process as I just did for the small stone.
We tore a hole when we broke through, 'cause some words right on your back. We got every head to spin. Hook it back.
And with that, my last stone is in place once I get those corners leveled out. Real happy with the way this is working out so far. And again, this is the first time I've ever attempted a project like this, so it's not terribly difficult to do. I'm applying tape underneath the grout line there because there's obviously nothing there to catch the grout and to prevent it from falling through. So to ensure I get a good fill, I want to have that tape there to allow the grout to fall in on it. Now, just like any other tiling or stonework grout job you're going to do, you want to liberally apply the grout, fill that entire void as best you can. And honestly, in this case, I filled it as best I could, and then I went back and did a second application just after everything's set up. So just using an inexpensive plastic putty knife there, and then going back and cleaning it up with a damp sponge and a bucket of water. Very similar to any other kind of grout job you might do. Now, I was a little concerned about that dark, shadowy area there that came about as I was wiping up the grout. The only thing I can figure is that that's the result of me going at cleaning up the stone a little bit too aggressively with that Scotch-Brite pad to get the Sharpie mark off. Now, I did seal it with 2 coats of sealer before I grouted, but maybe I didn't let it dry long enough, or maybe you should put a good 3 to 4 coats on to prevent that from happening. Nonetheless, once it dried, that shadowing went away nearly completely, so I was very relieved about that. Now, in this case right here, you notice that I've got a little bit of missing grout there. Couldn't tell when I was applying because of the tape, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reapply the grout in there and let it set up, and you can see that worked out pretty nicely. Now I got a good fill all the way around. Now, that sharp point kind of concerned us a little bit. We figured over the years, with the fireplace sticking out into the room, that would find its way to hit some people in the shin and ankle, and might be kind of painful. So we decided to grab a tile file and knock that sharp point down. Now, I went at this kind of aggressively, removed probably a good 1/4 inch of material, and I was a little worried that I'd be changing the look of that split face stone, but I'm happy to say that when it was all said and done, and after I applied sealer to the grout line, and the stone that I filed down, it blended in real nicely. And you can't even really tell I did any shaping after the fact. Now, as most tile files will have, there's a flat side and a convex side. So the convex side is that kind of semicircle, and I use that to replicate the grout line to get a little bit of a concave look in the grout line, so that it has a nice uniform appearance all the way around the top and vertical edge of that grout line.
It's just a deadline with no end.
Okay, and we are getting pretty close to being finished with this project. Applying a final 2 coats of sealer to the stone. That'll be on the upper side, the grout lines, and the facing. So as you can see, I've already started to apply stone to the facing of the fireplace. And this is the same stone that I used for the backsplash. This fireplace is in the kitchen and dining room. We have kind of a great room concept in the house following our remodel, and the stone went on real nicely. I'll be posting the fireplace stone video next, and that's kind of the culmination of a 3-part video series, which is fireplace stone, box mantle, and hearth stone. So hopefully to show you guys how to do the complete project in 3 videos. So as you can see, the installation of a stone of this size for a nice fireplace hearth is really not that difficult to do. And certainly something that I think a do-it-yourselfer can tackle, again, as long as you have a good strong helper to help support the stones while you cut them, and maybe a little bit of help putting them into place. But honestly, I found this project to be much easier than I anticipated, and I sure am happy I tackled it. And so is Kona. And this has quickly become Kona's preferred spot for a long winter's nap. Well, hey folks, that brings us to the end of this video. Sure do appreciate you sticking with me through it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And be sure and subscribe so you don't miss any future Do and Brew videos. Best of luck on your next project. See you back here next time on Do and Brew. Take care, folks.